Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am Priyanka, a writer, researcher, and mystic, and today we are going to talk about the Godhead. So, this is a second lecture in a three-part series on the Godhead. The Godhead meaning the infinite, pure consciousness of God that stands before, above, and within the finite existence. And when I say the finite existence, I mean the different spiritual beings and spiritual planes, and also the material beings, the human beings, and the material plane that expand through the cosmos across different stars and planets. So, the cosmos is the creation of the Godhead. And in this lecture, we are going to understand creation and dissolution through the Godhead. So, creation and dissolution is also the process of the veiling of the Godhead. That means God has to limit his infinite light or consciousness to create the finite existence. And dissolution is the process of unveiling the Godhead. That means God has to expand his infinite light and consciousness to then dissolve the finite existence. And when we understand creation and dissolution of the cosmos through the Godhead, we also understand, which is the main point of this lecture, our own process of moving from suffering or bondage to liberation. So, creation is the process of falling into bondage or suffering, and dissolution is the process of liberation. Because what is dissolution, right? Like, dissolution is dissolving your lower ego within yourself that has assumed this independent existence from the infinite consciousness of God. The fact that we think we are these finite beings is merely an illusion because of the veil of Maya. So the process of dissolution is dissolving this veil of Maya within ourselves by beginning to see how we are a fractalization of this infinite consciousness. And we are going to explore this through the triune nature of the Godhead through two different wisdom traditions. So when I say triune, I mean the three-in-one essence of the Godhead, the three different expressions of the Godhead that are made of the same substrate. And this triune nature is always veiled across different cultures. That means we can only perceive this triune nature of the Godhead once we unveil it through dissolving our lower ego and aligning with this infinite consciousness. So we are going to look at this triune nature through Kabbalah, which is the Ain Soph and Ain Soph Aur, and through Hinduism, which is Shiva, Shakti, and Bindu. And not just this, when we explore these concepts, we will also understand the creation of outer space or cosmos, as we say, and we will also understand the concept of liberation being when our mind becomes like the void. So we will also understand the concept of the void and why making the mind like a void is the ultimate path to liberation. It is the ultimate goalpost that any spiritual path will and must eventually lead you to. And for people who haven't seen my last lecture, in my last lecture, I explored the Godhead through Christianity and another triune concept in Hinduism. So we looked at the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and we also looked at Bhagwan, Paramatma, and Brahman. So these two concepts we looked at in the perspective of how they represent different expressions of the triune nature within ourselves, and also how are they different expressions of the God. And we understood that how our own process of awakening can be mirrored with these three concepts. So if you're interested, you can also go check out that lecture. And for this lecture, I would like to say that when we explore this infinite unknowable consciousness of God, it will sound very abstract. It will sound like a lot of archetypal expressions and symbolism. And this is because we are trying to know the unknowable, right? And even though human language has tried to comprehend it, this material is meant to not appeal to your logical brain really, even though it might a little bit, but it is mainly supposed to create sense impressions upon your being to ultimately expand your consciousness. And in fact, in the mystery school traditions, the way they approach these topics was that they would give the initiate symbols regarding the process of creation, and the initiate was supposed to meditate and contemplate on these symbols and understand the process of creation within their own being, within their own consciousness. So you can also meditate on certain symbols that I will mention in this lecture. So with that being said, let's dive in and let's look at the Godhead through Kabbalah, which is the Ain Soph, and Ain Soph Aur. So this triune nature in Kabbalah is said to be a part of the negative existence. And when we say negative existence in spiritual science, we essentially mean the part of existence which is formless, it has no mind, it is the void, and it is complete, full, and pure. So the journey from Ain to Ain Soph Aur can be seen as Ain, which is the father that transcends through the Ain Soph and culminates in the Ain Soph Aur. This is the journey from the void to the genesis of existence. So Ain can be seen as the nothingness or the pure void. It is the supreme essence of Godhead that holds the dormant potentiality of existence. And then we have the Ain Soph. The Ain Soph is the limitless space. It is nothingness made abstract, and it is the essence of God that limits itself before the dawn of creation. And then we have Ain Soph Aur. So the Ain Soph Aur is the limitless light. It is the first differentiation from the void, which holds the active potentiality to create existence. And then this Ain Soph Aur limits itself or concentrate itself into a certain point known as Kether. So this Kether can be seen as the concentrated point of divine will. After this, we get the spiritual hierarchies, and we will explore the nature of this Kether as we go. But let's focus on the Ain Soph here, because the Kabbalists, they place a lot of emphasis on explaining creation through Ain Soph. So Ain Soph is known as the ancient of the ancients, and it is often symbolized with a closed eye or a circle to signify its eternality. So to create the cosmos, the Ain Soph essentially is first everywhere, right? Like at first there is just the void with no differentiation in it. So as the Ain limits itself into the Ain Soph retreats its infinite light from the entire cosmos to create a circumference and a concentrated point of existence. So this concentrated point then goes on from the Ain Soph Aur to the Kether. So the Ain Soph is expanded through the cosmos. It withdraws its light, creates a circumference around the cosmos, and it also creates a point. So this is how we can say that God is the center and God is also the area, and how centralizing the infinite essence of God is also limiting it. And this is the first step in creation, which is limitation and centralization. And what the Ain Soph leaves behind in the area is an abyss. And the Kabbalists call this abyss a chaotic crystalline sea. The abyss is never empty. It is the void, but it is not empty. And it's interesting that they called it the chaotic crystalline sea, because chaos actually originates from the ancient Greek word chaos, and this signifies the primordial void, and the void isn't empty. So when we say crystalline, we can connect this to the concept of plasma. So plasma is the fourth state of matter. It is known as the fourth state of matter in science, but it is not actually the fourth state of matter. It is the primordial state of matter out of which all the three states of matter come into being, which is solid, liquid, and gas. And there's an entire scientific process which we can understand to look at how the three states of matter come out of plasma. It is only known as the fourth state of matter because it was discovered very late, but it was always known across ancient traditions as Akasha, for example. And space is actually known to be 99.9% plasma and only around 1% as matter. So the primordial void is essentially plasma, and plasma in its highest form under extreme heat turns into crystals. Hence the phrase crystalline chaotic sea also perfectly aligns with what science says is the core nature of space. So from this we understand how God is not just the center but also the area, and the Ain Soph creates this twofold division within itself. And the center point of this, as we saw, is known as Kether. So Kether is known to be this dot through which the entire creation then unfolds. It is known as the hollow crown, which is this bridge between the unmanifest and the manifest. It is also known as this supreme individualization of the universal essence, and in the Hermetic tradition it is also known as the divine androgen. That means the Kether is this point of unity of the negative and positive existence, and the feminine and masculine existence, and it is this bridge between the unmanifest and the manifest. So a degree of light inferior to the Kether then creates the rest of the spiritual hierarchies, which is also known as the Kabbalistic tree of life. And there is a book in Kabbalah known as Zohar, which then describes this process. When the concealed of the concealed wished to reveal himself, he first made a single point. The infinite was entirely unknown, and diffused no light before this luminous point violently broke through into vision. And we can also see how this process, how this distinction between the Ain Soph and the created universe is mirrored within the human being. So human beings are known to have this auric egg in Kabbalah, which is known as the causal sphere. And when I say the causal sphere, I mean the pure consciousness within the human being, which contains pure spirit. It is our energy body, which is completely pure. It can also be known as a higher self, which is completely aligned with the infinite consciousness. So this auric egg bears the same relationship to our physical body as the Ain Soph does to the created universe. And this auric egg can be seen as expanding in all directions, and it completely encircles all of our lower bodies. So now we can move on to the Hindu concept of Bindu, Shiva, and Shakti, and we will also see how this limitation and centralization of God's light, which further then goes into the process of differentiation, is also seen in this concept of Bindu, Shiva, and Shakti. So in this triune nature, we first have Shiva, and when I say Shiva, I actually mean the MahaShiva, because I don't mean Shiva, the deity that is again in the finite existence. So this is MahaShiva, the first cause of Shiva. So MahaShiva is the primal void or pure consciousness, and this is surrounded by Maya or Shakti, and again here I mean the Mahashakti. So Mahashakti is known as the power of consciousness. So Shiva is the pure consciousness or void, and Shakti is this power of consciousness. So what this power of consciousness or Shakti does is that she limits the infinite space of the void and creates a circumference around it. And then we get Bindu. So again, we have a centralized point over here with a circumference around it. And Bindu is known as this dimensionless dot. It is this all-encompassing point through which the entire creation stems forth through radiating vibrations. So the Bindu is also known as the Parabrahman, and it is a gateway between the unmanifest and manifest, just like the Kether. So now let's see how the cosmos actually comes out of Bindu. So first we saw how the Bindu is created through the MahaShiva and MahaShakti, and now we will see this further distillation of the Shiva and Shakti, which is unified within the Bindu, and the interaction between these two aspects to create the cosmos. So Shakti arises as a vibration or a vritti or a modification in the cosmic mind of Shiva. We can also say that this cosmic mind of Shiva manifests an intention of conscious energy, which is Shakti in Brahman. And when I say Brahman, I mean the universal consciousness. So to understand Brahman, I will just brush up on the triune nature of the Godhead in Hinduism. So this Godhead is basically the Bhagwan, which is the supreme personality of God, and Paramatma or super soul, which is the localized aspect of God, and Brahman, which is the universal consciousness of God. So you can say that Shiva, the cosmic mind, manifests a conscious energy or Shakti within the Brahman. And this intention of conscious energy is further crystallized. It is condensed. So this condensation then creates an objective field of consciousness, which can be observed outside of itself. So again, we get this idea of God limiting his infinite light and then further creating a condensation or concentration of this infinite light. And when this happens, we basically get this field of pure potentiality with these different condensations of intentions in the cosmic mind. And the Parashakti or the Mahashakti in this case then transforms into Maya Shakti. Thus, we get the illusion and the veil of Maya with this endless potentiality to bring things into creation. And this conscious energy then further diversifies to create Brahma. So Brahma is then the first differentiated being of the Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. So the Parabindu can be considered to have three parts. The first is the Mahamaya Shakti. It is also known as the great veiling power, and this is the powerful dominant force of this unmanifested cosmic energy. And then we have Brahmapada, which is Brahma, which is the center. And in my next lecture, I will explore the exact location and qualities of this Brahma physically in our galaxy, which is the galactic center. So we're going to get into the black hole. And then we have Anandakasha, which is the space of bliss around this center. So again, we have this concept of God being the center and also the area. And it is through the Bindu that we also get the first light of creation. So the light does not exist in this entire process. Bindu is the first manifestation of the light, and we can only connect to the infinite consciousness through the light. That's why most of spirituality is centered around connecting to this light of God, because it is through this light of God that we then connect to the infinite consciousness. And when we have incarnations of God walking on earth, they can only manifest through this light. The infinite consciousness obviously cannot come into finite existence just like that, right? It is only through this light that the essence of God can actually walk on earth. And if you want to tap into this unity of the Bindu, you can imagine a simple circle with a dot, or you can also go look up the symbol of the Bindu chakra, or you can simply imagine a moon filled with light, or also meditate on the yin and yang. And if you do that, please tell me in the comments if something interesting comes up for you. So till now, what we have been doing is we have been understanding the universal mind and the different stages and processes it goes through to bring creation into existence. And if we have to summarize this process, we basically get first limitation or centralization, and then we get differentiation, And along with differentiation, we also get objectification, because only if the infinite consciousness can divide itself into different, you can say, blobs of consciousness, we can get the process of objectification, which is an object and a subject. That means a consciousness can finally perceive something outside of itself. And this entire process is also what binds us to Maya. And now we can understand liberation as walking backwards on this path. So first, we will understand de-objectification. So in any spiritual teaching, we see there is a lot of stress on observing your thoughts, right? Observing your emotions. So we have to literally withdraw ourselves from being completely intertwined with our reality, with our experiences, and become an observer of those experiences. So this is going reverse in the process, and we can call this de-objectification, where we become the observer. So you experience your thoughts, your emotions, and your feelings from the state of non-reaction. And also when you take action, it is from this state of conscious action. And this is a practice, right? Because at first it might be very unnatural to you if you're not already doing this, if you're not acting as this observer who is just watching your life unfolding for this being that you call yourself. But as you do this, slowly the illusion of differentiation dissolves. You begin seeing how everything is indeed one in existence. And in spiritual science, this is known as the dissolving of the three aspects of the knowledge, knower, and the known, when all of this collapse into one. And Rudolf Steiner, in his book How to Know Higher Worlds, he really stresses on this process, and he simplifies it for us. He says that even if you cannot take an hour a day to meditate and contemplate, maybe just take out 5 minutes a day and really withdraw from your life, withdraw from your experiences, and review it as an observer. And you have to make this a daily practice to eventually get to that sense of solitude, where you actually begin to see how your notion that you are this physical being is an actual illusion. So this eventually then leads to unifying the microcosm and the macrocosm, or spirit and matter. And this also gets into the mystery of the numbers 1, 2, and 3. So 1 is the number of unity, and 2 is an illusion. The number 2 actually does not exist, because as soon as there is duality, there is the transcendence of duality. And 3 is the number of harmony, which again then leads to 1, because as you harmonize the 3, you get the 1, and the 1 can only manifest into finite existence through a triune nature. So as soon as the number 2 or duality comes into picture, it is automatically transcended. And we can also see this in human relationships. When two people get into a relationship, there is their consciousness, individual consciousness, and then there is a couple consciousness that forms, which again forms like a triune nature. So as you transcend this duality, you automatically decentralize your lower self, and you begin living from the infinite consciousness of God. And you can see the transcending of this duality as living from the Bindu or the Kether. So the Bindu is this dimensionless dot, right? It can also be seen as this final culmination where everything becomes one. So the Bindu is also known as the Mona of the self, and this is when all mental judgments collapse. You become this being which lives from this pure consciousness, and your mind becomes like the void, which is Shiva. So this is the ultimate goal of any spiritual practice, for your mind to literally have no modifications and becoming a pure expression of Shiva. And this is the whole point of yoga, because yoga is the science of the mind. So if you have to summarize what yoga teaches us, whether it's physical yoga or it's Raja Yoga, which are these mental practices, it ultimately teaches us Chitta, Vritti, Nirodha. So Chitta is mind stuff, Vritti is modification, and nirodha is restraint. So yoga teaches us how to develop this restraint of these modifications in our mind to ultimately attain liberation and be free from suffering. So when I say the void, I also mean becoming empty, or shunya, as we say in the Hindu tradition, that you have to become shunya, become so empty that neither pain nor pleasure moves you. You are experiencing everything, and on the outside it will look like you are deeply engaged with reality, but you're not really moved by either pain or pleasure or the highs and lows of life, because you are acting as this observer, and the entire differentiation of reality has collapsed within you, and you decenter your lower self and you centralize your higher self, and the higher self is basically the infinite consciousness. And when someone does this to the highest capacity, they begin to step into this concept known as Jivanmukta, or being liberated while they are in the body. And you do not have to become a sage for that, because you can fulfill your dharma, your soul's purpose, and be engaged in this material world. You do not have to go to a forest or become isolated, because there are more than 100 paths to liberation. So you can become a Jivan Mukta by controlling your mind, making it like the void, becoming empty. And so in Vedanta philosophy, Jivanmukta is someone who has attained full self-realization and enlightenment while still living in the body. They are free from ignorance, selfishness, egoism, and fear, experiencing constant bliss and unity with the Brahman, which is the supreme reality. So we can say that someone who is bonded to the physical world, who sees the world as world, is living in suffering, and the liberated one sees the world as Brahman, which is the universal consciousness. And this is a very beautiful line said by Ram Dass, which really expresses the essence of living through this state. I can use every experience of my life as a vehicle for working on myself, to extricate myself from the attachments of mind, and so that I can be a statement of peace, of presence, of love, of clarity, so that all my manifestations heal, and all I can do is work on myself. And sometimes I work on myself through being in the world, and sometimes I work on myself by pulling back. The game is to quiet the mind, open the heart, keep the energies moving, and do what you can to relieve suffering. It's all cosmic play. I really experience being aligned with God at play. It's all a game, a beautiful game. It's just very scary to think of it as a game. It doesn't mean game in the sense of trivia. It means game in the sense of exquisiteness of form. So until you reach this absolute state of unity, which is the entire point of living this life, you can try to create a personal resonance with it. Because as we were living in the Kali Yuga and coming out of the Kali Yuga, the way our brains have developed essentially dislocated us from this supreme truth. So our physical body, our physical makeup, and the development of our brain has not really supported this process. It has really modified our perceptions in a way that it's really difficult for us to even perceive and comprehend this truth. It is not enough to just know that you exist in this Maya, because I was in that position and I still am in that position before, but I would say I'm just beginning to really see and experience everything as Maya. Because before I just knew from my logical brain, like, this is an illusion, this is a Maya, it's the matrix. But when you truly begin to experience it, you unlock this potential in your DNA. So even though our brains have developed in a certain way, this perception of reality is stored within our genes, and the gene keys does a beautiful job at explaining this process through moving from the shadow awareness to the gift that comes through the shadow, or the light that comes through this darkness, and getting to the different siddhis. So all of this potential is stored within your DNA, which is determined by the etheric energy, not the physical DNA. If you get a genetic test, you're obviously not going to get to know any of this. So your DNA has layers and layers that science can never unlock. So as you experience this perceptual shift, which is already pre-wired into your DNA, you orient yourself to the universal consciousness. And as you orient yourself to this universal infinite consciousness, you also begin stepping into your own individuality. You literally express yourself as this unique expression of God, which you really are. So this process does not mean that you become so neutral or numb. It in fact takes you deeper into the heart of life, and you really begin to express your dharma. And another symptom of this is also synchronicity, because you are literally tapping into this magical dimension and living with it. And this can also be seen as manifestation. But the entire problem with the manifestation culture is that they have treated this entire concept of controlling the mind as planting certain thoughts in the mind so that you can achieve things in your material existence. But what you're actually supposed to do is that your mind is supposed to be purified to the extent that whatever comes through you as a manifestation is a pure expression of that. So this entire lecture can ultimately be summarized as transcending duality and beginning to see through the illusion of differentiation, and ultimately not seeing things as subject and object, but really collapsing the triune essence within us. That means collapsing the knowledge, knower, known, or the seer, sight, and seen. And this ultimately takes us deeper into the heart of existence. So that's it for today, guys. I hope this lecture was insightful. Please tell me in the comments if you have any thoughts or opinions, and like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.